This is El Chino Antrax, or Jose Rodrigo Arachiga Gamboa. He was once the Sinaloa Cartel's highest-ranking assassin and a ruthless drug lord who was extremely tough, even for his fellow sicarios. Some people join the cartel from impoverished backgrounds with few job opportunities. They're not necessarily evil, they're just desperate for some quick cash. But what about those cartel members who climb the ranks and get to the top, killing and maiming on the way? Well, that's another type of cartel member. Some people have such a lust for power and money, they will literally stop at nothing. And the Sinaloa Cartel is a place that encourages ruthless people to do their worst. So let's explore why El Chino was hired by the Sinaloa Cartel, and how he became their most feared killer, and how he met his strange demise in 2020. Jose Rodrigo Arachiga Gamboa was born in Coyoacán, Mexico on June 15, 1980. And unlike many of his cartel peers, Jose did not grow up poor. In fact, he was the son of a rich and educated family. So why did he join the cartel? In Jose's case, there was a geographical reason. You see, his childhood neighbor was none other than Ismael Zambada, aka El Mayo. El Mayo famously led the Sinaloa Cartel from the shadows, with El Chapo as the frontman. After El Chapo's arrest, El Mayo officially took control of the cartel. But to this day, his whereabouts are unknown, and there's a $15 million reward on his head. So Jose grew up playing with El Mayo's many sons. They all grew up into young men, and they started their own families. But when Jose was married with kids, he began to struggle financially. So who other to ask for help than El Mayo's sons? Vicente Zambada, El Mayo's oldest, immediately offered Jose a job as a bodyguard for the Sinaloa Cartel. Jose started small, with minute errands for the cartel, but I don't imagine he was doing the groceries. As a cartel bodyguard, small errands include beating people up and threatening them into submission. So Jose got engulfed in a world of violence, and he started to like it. Up until 2008, he worked for the Sinaloa Cartel leaders, beating, then even killing their enemies. But 2008 was a fateful year, as there was a big rift in the cartel. Beltran-Leyva cartel separated from the Sinaloa. By now, Jose had a nasty thirst for blood, and he wanted more power than his simple bodyguard job offered him. So he seized the opportunity and created his own armed squadron, Los Antrax. Now he was El Chino Antrax, which means the Chinese anthrax. No one really foresaw that El Chino Antrax was harboring his mind. You wouldn't really think a young family man from a well-off family would want to dismember people and leave their bodies strung up on bridges. But sadly, that's all true. Under El Chino's command, Los Antrax were pure evil. They not only targeted the Sinaloa Cartel's enemies, they killed civilians and police officers, anyone who interfered with their violent activities, and anyone who looked at them the wrong way. El Chino Antrax wasn't alone. His most trusted man was Rene Velasquez Venezuela. He was just as nasty and bloodthirsty, and was happy to take any life as long as he could proclaim his power. So by 2010, the police were out to get them, and so were rival cartels. The first to go was El Pocho Antrax, another violent squad leader. He died in a huge shootout with the Beltran-Leyva cartel in June 2010. The following year, 3 more Antrax members were arrested by the police, but they weren't jailed. They were tortured on information on the rest of the group, then killed. By the end of the year, El Chino Antrax lost one of his right-hand men, Francisco Arce Rubio, or Pancho Arce. He was playing an indoor soccer game when a rival cartel army barged in on the team and gunned down several Sinaloa and Antrax men. Pancho Arce died at the scene. This is when El Chino Antrax became scared. You would think a man as ruthless and violent as El Chino Antrax wouldn't bow down to rival cartel attacks. Cartel drug lords and squad leaders usually retaliate until every party is particularly disseminated. But in late 2011, El Chino realized he was vulnerable and asked for El Mayo's help. He figured that if El Mayo negotiated directly with the rival cartels, then Los Antrax would receive an extra layer of protection. But even though El Mayo spoke with the rival kingpins, the negotiations didn't work. Los Antrax were incredibly violent, and the only way they could be stopped was with more violence. In February 2012, Antrax soldier Roque Landeros and 3 other men were killed. The situation was even more worrying here. They hadn't been killed by rival cartels or the police. They were the victims of an international struggle within the Sinaloa Cartel. El Chapo's army group was going after Los Antrax. By now, they wanted El Chino Antrax arrested too. In 2012, he was charged with conspiring to import 500 grams of methamphetamines and 5 kilos of white powder to the US. The DEA had listened to phone conversations between El Chino and his many traffickers over a period of 6 months, and after arresting several small fish from the Sinaloa Cartel, they had enough testimonies to indict El Chino Antrax. He was concerned. The Mexican authorities, the DEA, rival cartels, and even El Chapo were fighting to have Los Antrax dissolved. Amidst all this, these are the photos of El Chino Antrax, with posts of himself on social media. He seemed to be completely oblivious to the fact that he was a wanted man. He even went to VIP parties in the US. This is a picture of El Chino next to Paris Hilton. He also posted pictures of himself with El Mayo's son, and if that wasn't cringy enough, here's a picture he took of his money and weapons. Then the most conspicuous photo he posted was of his skull ring. This was the symbol of Los Antrax. Now the DEA had a clear connection between him and Los Antrax. El Chino had escaped Mexican authorities for years, even with all his social media posts, because he would usually blur his face. Then El Chino even had plastic surgery and tried to alter his fingerprints, even though he wasn't showing it online. He was afraid, and he was desperate to elude the police. But when the DEA got a hold of his social media profiles, there was no escaping them. On New Year's Eve 2013, El Chino Antrax flew from Mexico to the Netherlands and landed at Amsterdam Airport. The DEA knew he'd boarded that flight, and they alerted the Dutch authorities. They were thus on the lookout for a Mexican national wearing a glam skull ring. That day, he was arrested inside the airport. 3 days later, an FBI agent and Mexican newspapers leaked the information. El Chino Antrax was in custody. He was traveling as Norberto Siqueiros Garcia and was identified via his skull ring. He had taken the identity of a dead Mexican citizen and had even changed his appearance, but he couldn't let go of his pride. If it weren't for his anthrax ring, he might have never gotten caught. El Chino was initially taken to Vught maximum security prison in the Netherlands, but the United States wanted him extradited for the plethora of drug trafficking charges. On January 8th, the U.S. Department of Treasury sanctioned El Chino under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designated Act. Yep, there is such a thing. This basically meant that all his U.S. assets were frozen and he could no longer make deals from jail. Through this act, a big plot twist was revealed. El Chino Antrax was El Mayo's army man, but he was also El Chapo's trafficking drug lord. He was working for both Sinaloa bosses. Could he be the reason for the rift between El Chapo and El Mayo? Why was El Chapo attacking Los Antrax before his arrest? On July 10, 2014, El Chino Antrax was extradited to the U.S. The next day, during his hearing in San Diego, he pleaded not guilty to all of the charges against him. Throughout the following 6 months, El Chino's defense team continued to delay his trial and bring new evidence, so as to confuse the prosecution. His court appearances were delayed every month till a milestone in March 2015. On March 20th, El Chino pleaded guilty to conspiracy to import white powder and marijuana. There's more. He even cooperated with the US government, helping them bring down several Sinaloa Cartel members. Did he accept the deal that would grant him a shorter sentence? Or was he feeling genuine regret about his years with the Sinaloa? Well, both might be accurate. After receiving his sentence, he told the judge. He promised the judge he would seek work in construction and home remodeling after his release. But it's also pretty clear that his cooperation with the feds earned him a good deal. El Chino was only sentenced to 7 years in prison, and since he'd already served about a year before he pleaded guilty, El Chino was released in March 2020. He was supposed to serve 5 more years under probation. However, this was the beginning of the end for El Chino Antrax. Now, he was going by a different name. His face was heavily altered, and he steered clear of anyone in Mexico. He knew all too well that if he would make contact with any of his former cartel friends, he would be killed. The Sinaloa Cartel is not too forgiving with rats. On May 6th, 2 months after his release, Jose was declared missing. His probation officer visited his home for their usual check-in when he noticed he had vanished from his home. He'd also left behind his cell phone, Who'd leave their phone behind in a normal state of mind these days? Something was off. As soon as the prosecutor phoned the authorities, Judge Dana Sabraw, who had sentenced Jose in 2015, issued a warrant for his arrest. There was a chance he'd fled the US. But 3 days later, authorities discovered a much more grim scene. Jose's bloated body was lying next to his sister, Ada, and her husband, Juan Garcia, all of them dead from gunshot wounds inside her BMW. The car had been abandoned on a dirt road in Culiacan, their hometown. The car was identified as Ada's, but authorities weren't sure if El Chino was actually dead. Sometimes narcos fake their own deaths, and since the body was already severely decomposed, and El Chino had undergone plastic surgery, it wasn't easy to tell if it was really him. So the police contacted the rest of Jose's family and asked them to do the horrible task of identifying their loved ones' bodies. Did El Chino and Thrax flee to Mexico, only to be killed by the cartel when they realized he was there? Or was he kidnapped from San Diego? Jose met his demise at the hands of the Sinaloa Cartel. He was raised, hired, then killed by them. His whole life was defined by the Sinaloa Cartel, and he met his end that was just as violent as his behavior with the Los Antrax.
Luna is accused of taking bribes from especially drug kingpin Juan El Chapo Guzman while providing protection for him.
Last week, federal prosecutors in Brooklyn scored what they framed as a victory in the war on drugs. They convicted Genaro Garcia Luna, Mexico's former top law enforcement official, of taking millions of dollars in bribes from El Chapo and the Sinaloa Cartel.
These are people who gave fentanyl to a man, watched him die, and then sent that same batch of fentanyl to the United States. They know that they are poisoning and killing Americans. They just don't care because they make billions of dollars doing it.
Mexico's narcotics cartel rapidly gained momentum in the last few decades. The government's war on narcotics trafficking has helped them capture many narco lords over the years, but the more they capture, the stronger these cartels grow. It's not a surprise that both local and federal law enforcement of Mexico are connected to the cartels and do their bidding. Apart from turning a blind eye to their actions, these agents sometimes actively help the cartel traffic narcotics. 2023 left the world shocked when a high-ranking official of Mexico was accused of being an associate of Joaquin Guzman, or El Chapo. Chapo ran the biggest cartel in Mexico, the Sinaloa Cartel, which smuggles the biggest share of narcotics into the United States. His name is Genaro Garcia Luna, and he is the former Secretary of Public Security in Mexico. So, how did Garcia Luna get in touch with the Sinaloa Cartel? What made him switch allegiance? And why didn't his peers ever suspect his involvement with the cartel? Stay tuned as we uncover these and more information on Genaro Garcia Luna, the top official who betrayed his own countrymen to aid a narcotics cartel. Genaro Garcia Luna was born in Mexico City on July 10, 1968. After completing his undergraduate in Mexico, he went to the U.S. to complete higher studies. He specialized in security and intelligence and was trained in various countries, including the United States, Spain, Israel, and Japan. He started his career in 1989 in intelligence at the Centro de Investigación y Seguridad Nacional, or Center for National Security and Investigation, CSEN, focusing on counterintelligence and terrorism. He climbed his way to the top due to his integrity and hard work. In December 2006, he became the Secretary of Public Security of Mexico. He designed the new police model and formed the Federal Police Force, which started its operations in 2009.
El Estado mexicano debe pagar el costo operacional que requiere la seguridad. Un error grave es que el Estado mexicano no pague ese costo operativo, porque si el Estado no lo paga el crimen.
Everyone believed that state security was in the right hands. Garcia Luna was innovative, capable, and driven to protect his people. He appeared sincere and dutiful, and was able to convince people that he had the best interest of the citizens at heart. In April 2015, Garcia Luna was nominated for election as a board member of a Utah-based security company called Secure Alert. However, Garcia Luna came under suspicion many times because of his lifestyle. He owned several properties and had plenty of money. Now, it has been revealed that the former security chief inexplicably built a fortune in 6 years. According to his asset statements, the former official owned a home valued at 450,000 Mexican pesos and another priced at 500,000 Mexican pesos in 2002, to owning a house worth 7,550,000 Mexican pesos, luxury cars, and other properties in 2008. He could never clarify how he had attained such vast wealth. His salary as a Mexican government official could never provide such luxury. According to official numbers, Garcia Luna's salary increased by 120%, and his assets increased their value 5 times. The Public Service Ministry, or SFP, initially shared information about his ownership of a Harley-Davidson motorcycle and 2 Mustangs, but years later, it refused to provide information in regards to his assets. In a trial held for Joaquin Guzman in 2018, a witness mentioned Garcia Luna's name and his involvement with the Sinaloa Cartel. This prompted an arrest warrant, and Luna was finally captured in 2019.
Garcia Luna was one of the architects of Mexico's modern drug war, overseeing all federal law enforcement. But the trial revealed that for more than a decade, until he left office in 2012, he was selling information to cartel leaders, enabling them to smuggle tons of drugs across the border.
The news came as a shock to many citizens and officials from the entire world. Garcia Luna was in close collaboration with many U.S. officials. Being a part of state intelligence, it was his job to fight and capture cartel members. The revelation shook the faith of the locals once again and made them question everything they had believed about their protectors so far. But how did the Sinaloa Cartel recruit Garcia Luna, and why did he endanger years of his career to join the dark side? The Sinaloa Cartel is the biggest narcotics trafficker and group of organized criminals in Mexico. It began inside the infamous Guadalajara Cartel, which was the largest and strongest cartel in the 1980s. In 1985, the Guadalajara Cartel broke apart, and one of the factions began operating as the Sinaloa Cartel. Joaquin Guzman, or El Chapo, assumed the position of the leader, and the cartel thrived under his reign.
Alguien se mata, por algo se mata alguien.
Puro Sinaloa!
The cartel was flexible. Their structure was fluid, which meant that they could morph their chain of command whenever they felt the need for it.
But the Sinaloa groups always operated less as a rigidly organized command structure and more as a loose network of drug traffickers who can work together and collaborate as the situation demands.
It enhanced their agility as an organization and helped them achieve much more than their rival cartels.
Their structure is more complicated and perhaps more usable for adaptation than the structure of other criminal groups.
But what does it mean? It means that the units are trained to take up any role or action that is required to get a job done. So when the group had a missing role, anyone could step up and fill it in as long as it could get the job done smoothly.
So the structure is one that, on the one hand, has clear lines of commands, but at the same time, there is enough flatness to it that losing a particular branch or particular segment of the network doesn't bring the whole organization under.
This made the Sinaloa Cartel like the Hydra from ancient mythology. Even if you manage to cut off its head, a new one grows and takes its place. The Sinaloa kingpin El Chapo was arrested and extradited to the U.S. in 2017.
Last Thursday night, the world's most notorious drug lord, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, was extradited to the United States. He was arraigned in New York on Friday and faces 6 separate indictments across the country for his role as the head of the Sinaloa drug cartel.
But did it mean that the cartel operations were over? Law enforcement managed to destroy the Medellin cartel after gunning down Pablo Escobar. They had the same hope for the Sinaloa cartel. But even after the arrest of El Chapo, the cartel continued its operations.
But even after his imprisonment and now extradition, the organization El Chapo built is very much intact.
Sigue siendo el cártel más fuerte, definitivamente.
So, who took his place? In the absence of their father, El Chapo's sons, Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, and Joaquin Guzman Lopez picked up the cartel operations.
Sons of the world's most notorious drug lord, the U.S. Justice Department says the so-called Chapitos took control of the Mexican Sinaloa drug cartel when their father El Chapo landed in prison.
They followed in the footsteps of their father while maintaining the operations. However, they added new narcotics to the lineup and found more creative ways of smuggling the substance to different corners of the world.
From there, U.S. officials now say the 4 sons only amplified El Chapo's brutality and used their force to fast-track attack an international network for a lab-created poison disguised in drugs.
Even though one of the Los Chapitos, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, was arrested in 2023 and extradited to the U.S., the other sons are still at large and continuing the operation smoothly.
Now turning to the son of Mexican drug lord El Chapo, extradited to the U.S. on drug trafficking charges.
Ravi, El Chapo's son Ovidio put on a private plane with a one-way ticket to Chicago. This 33-year-old son of the Sinaloa Cartel kingpin tonight at the federal lockup in downtown Chicago after a court arraignment on drug trafficking and money laundering.
The U.S. authorities are trying to track them down as they believe that capturing the Chapitos can potentially bring the Sinaloa Cartel to its downfall. But the Sinaloa Cartel didn't achieve all of it alone. They had tons of help from the local and federal law enforcement authorities over the years, which was proven many times in the last decade.
The crucial skill that set the Sinaloa Federation apart from other cartels is that while some were buying heavy weaponry, the Sinaloa Cartel were buying politicians.
Even the Sinaloa Army has confirmed this. From their statements, it seemed like they had a cordial relationship with the local law enforcement.
Do the police ever come by here?
Así han llegado a venir, pero solo pasan por caminos y uno ya mismo, pues muchas veces le da dinero uno, otra vez piden solo comida. Otra vez quieren mujeres y eso.
The cartel was so powerful that they also ran prisons. In 2023, former Sinaloa Cartel member Ali Gonzalez appeared in an interview and spoke about his time in the cartel and cartel-run prison, and depicted a picture of how deep the Sinaloa cartel's influences ran.
A lot of people think that correctional officers are the ones that are in charge inside. They are not. The ones that are in charge are the inmates and the cartel that runs the prison system.
The locale and the federal police, both were involved with the cartel.
Is police connected to cartels?
Yeah, definitely. Local police are 100%. State police, you could say 50-50.
In 2019, after his arrest, Garcia Luna's history was finally scrutinized for his involvement with the cartel. His trial uncovered many unsettling details about him, and authorities finally understood that he created his vast wealth with cartel bribe money.
U.S. prosecutors say the bribes could be in the tens of millions of dollars.
Prosecutors allege that he received around $274 million in bribes from the cartel from 2001 to 2012, first as head of the Federal Investigative Agency, the Mexican equivalent of the FBI, and then as Secretary of Public Security. He supposedly also helped them traffic tons of narcotics.
Witnesses testified that federal police officers under Garcia Luna's watch would sometimes unload cocaine shipments for the cartel, or serve as bodyguards for drug bosses.
Garcia Luna siding with El Chapo meant that his men would always be protected.
Prosecutors say Genaro Garcia Luna provided a clear path for members of the Sinaloa drug cartel to run drugs into the U.S. without fear of capture or consequence by law enforcement.
In his trial, a DEA agent recounted the huge amount of narcotics he'd confiscated back in the early 2000s.
Well, agents testified between 2002 and 2003, they seized close to 4,000 kilos of coke right here in New York City. In fact, one of the agents saying the biggest drug seizure of his career happened in 2002.
But why is this information important? The confiscation coincided with Garcia Luna's tenure in the government, but was it really a coincidence?
It's alleged that Garcia Luna helped the Sinaloa drug cartel smuggle more than 50 tons of cocaine into the U.S. If the allegations against Garcia Luna are true, it means he would have been working for the cartel when these record-setting cocaine seizures happened.
Investigations also proved that Garcia Luna went all out trying to help the Sinaloa kingpin. He used all possible methods for shipping narcotics to assist the process. Sometimes he flew them inside the country, and other times he sailed them in.
Prosecutors said that the cartel operated during this time like the FedEx of cocaine, shipping tons of drugs in submarines, ships, and planes that landed at Mexico City's international airport.
And what did the cartel members do with the substance? They supplied it within Mexico and into the United States. This was their shortcut way of earning thousands of dollars in the blink of an eye.
Por eso es muchísimo el dinero que viene. Entonces, a lo que tengo entendido, venían 50 kilos de fentanil ahí para distribuirlo todo el estado de Sinaloa.
Synthetic narcotics like fentanyl usually have low production costs, but they have a higher profit margin. They also come at a cheaper street price. This ensures higher consumption, so customers prefer it more than other forms of narcotics. The global production potential for fentanyl is just astronomical. as long as precursor chemicals are available, the supply of the finished drug is virtually endless, says Bryce Pardo, research officer at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. This also meant that the traffickers earned more money by selling these narcotics, and they happily showed off the wealth they accumulated through selling narcotics to innocents.
And they weren't exactly subtle with their riches. One drug lord was even allowed to have a zoo with lions and panthers and exotic cats.
But Garcia Luna didn't only help the cartel smuggle narcotics. Many times he also helped them with intel regarding police operations against various cartels so that the cartel members could take counteractions against them, or at least protect themselves against raids.
Former cartel members testified this week that Garcia Luna accepted millions from the cartel in exchange for providing the cartel with information about police operations targeting cartel members.
Garcia denied all allegations against him and pleaded not guilty. But all 5 counts against Garcia Luna were proven, and he is expected to face imprisonment accordingly. However, instead of solving the problem, the trial has left behind some important questions.
Garcia Luna worked closely with the FBI and DEA for more than a decade and had contacts in the highest levels of the American government. In all that time, is it really possible that the Americans had no idea what he was up to?
During his trial, authorities called up key members from the DEA and other related organizations to get a possible picture of how Garcia Luna was able to conduct his dirty deed without anyone noticing.
Yesterday, prosecutors called members of the DEA, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, and the New York Port Authority to discuss the various ways drugs were being brought into the U.S. and the vast amounts of cocaine seized right here in New York City.
However, the prosecutors didn't direct the investigation towards the U.S. officials. During the trial, they only discussed the crimes of the Mexican authorities and how they impacted the narcotics trafficking scenario in the United States.
Prosecutors kept the case focused on corruption in Mexico, but the clear implication is that the Americans must have known more about Garcia Luna's cartel involvement than they've let on.
Prosecutors continue to build a case explaining why Garcia Luna is guilty and how corruption is rampant at all levels of law enforcement in Mexico and the military.
El Chapo's arrest, extradition to the United States, and trial all had garnered attention in America. But Garcia Luna's conviction and trial weren't in the limelight. However, as details of the case began to come to the surface, many Congress members began to notice discrepancies and started asking questions. Law enforcement agencies are trying their best to find the answers, because solving them would identify the faces who are working inside the U.S. law enforcement agencies but are also operating alongside the cartels from the shadows.
Senator Chuck Grassley sent a letter to the heads of the DEA and FBI demanding an explanation for how Garcia Luna was able to work for the U.S. while also helping El Chapo smuggle more than 100,000 pounds of cocaine across the border.
But from what it seems, we might never know if Garcia Luna had help from any U.S. authorities. Adam Isaacson is a part of the organization that monitors U.S. cooperation with Latin America's security forces. He has been closely studying American law enforcement activities in Latin America for years. After the trial of Garcia Luna, he expressed his concerns that the DEA and some U.S. authorities might be aware of Luna's involvement in the trafficking. However, they were also getting help from him as Garcia Luna was protecting only the Sinaloa Cartel and continued to work against the other cartels in Mexico.
It seems pretty clear that the DEA and other parts of the United States government knew that Garcia Luna was not somebody, that they could fully trust, and that in fact he may have been colluding with armed groups or with organized crime. But they still found him useful because he was going after other organized crime groups at the same time.
However, as the world is aware, the DEA might have an interest in fueling the situation.
That might be shocking, except the DEA has a long history of playing a dangerous game in Latin America, sending money and weapons of war to police and military units with terrible records of abuse.
U.S. authorities lamented Garcia Luna's actions during his trial and called him a traitor, reminding everyone that he won't be treated with respect anymore by the world. Garcia Luna, who once stood at the pinnacle of law enforcement in Mexico, will now live the rest of his days having been revealed as a traitor to his country and to the honest members of law enforcement who risked their lives to dismantle drug cartels, stated United States Attorney Peace. The trial also praised the DEA for its integrity. This might be a message to the narco lords that no matter how widespread their network becomes, the DEA is always out there to get them. Today's conviction of Genaro Garcia Luna clearly shows that DEA will stop at nothing to pursue corrupt political officials who engage in drug trafficking and violence. said DEA Administrator Ann Milgram. This is not the first time Mexican authorities have been involved in illegal trafficking. Edgar Vadia, the former attorney general from the state of Nayarit, was found guilty of this act in 2019 and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Surprisingly enough, during his trial, Vadia took the name of former Mexican President Felipe Calderón and said that he had instructed the government officials to support the Sinaloa Cartel when it was at war with other cartels, but the former president was quick to dismiss the allegations. I categorically deny the absurd statements reported by the press made today by the witness Vadia, Mr. Calderón tweeted on Tuesday. What you say about me is an absolute lie. I never negotiated or made a pact with criminals. No action has been taken against Felipe Calderón yet, but it's worth noting that Garcia Luna was a part of his cabinet during his tenure. From 2006 to 2012, Mr. Garcia Luna served in Mr. Calderón's cabinet as the Public Security Secretary, a powerful post in which he effectively ran the Mexican government's war against drug cartels. Only time will tell what happens to him. So what happens to the Sinaloa Cartel now that its kingpin and possibly also its biggest pawn in the Mexican government have been captured? The short answer is nothing. The Sinaloa Cartel continues to operate freely through its power and reaches, and they have no reason to slow down soon. The Sinaloa Cartel's soldiers also believe the same.
Aquí no cambió para nada. El narcotráfico nunca se va a acabar. Agarraron al Chapo, pero pues ya está otro. Y agarran a ese otro y hay otro. Esto no.
The DEA and other U.S. officials are still after Los Chapitos. The Sinaloa Cartel's fate might be decided after all of them have been captured. But until then, global citizens are hoping that the Mexican government won't shock the world with more corrupt officials like him.
They took 20 hours to pull the bodies from the well. You've seen the images here in a very isolated area south of Ensenada.
The first question for me is how one people, even if he's armed, could subdue three big guys.
Jesus Rado, also known as El Quecas, has been charged with forced disappearance.
Just wanted to drop you a quick message and say hello, baby.
Get ready for a story that'll chill you to your very core. Picture sandy shores, crashing waves, and three adventurers exploring Baja California's coast. Meet Jack, who is just getting ready to tie the knot with his longtime girlfriend and his companions, the Robinson brothers. Three men chasing thrills on their dream trip. But their idyllic trip quickly turns into a nightmare when they encounter the dreaded Sinaloa Cartel, and they're never seen alive again.
All lines of investigation are open at this point. We cannot dismiss any of them until we find the whereabouts of these people and establish what happened in this case.
Here's the twist. The cartel claims to have served up the alleged killers to the authorities. Yes, the same ruthless force is now playing judge and jury in a chilling murder case. But why the sudden cooperation? Well, let's just say that even the darkest forces have reputations to uphold. And the trio's disappearance, as well as the mind-boggling chain of events that followed, leaves us wondering, can monsters wear masks of saviors when it suits their agenda? And what of the shattered families left behind? One thing is clear though, sometimes the line between hero and villain can always be blurred. Let's dive in and find out exactly why everyone is saying that this case is as puzzling as it is.
I'm sensing a big grin on your face for some reason today. I hope you're full of positivity and smiles. Cheers, baby. Miss ya.
Golden beaches, the sound of waves crashing, and the adrenaline of surfing some of the best waves that Baja California, one of Mexico's most popular destinations, has to offer. That was the dream for three young adventurers. An American, Jack Carter Road, ready to trade bachelorhood for a ring, and the Australian Robinson brothers, Jake and Callum, who were living out what they had called the trip of a lifetime.
During the trip from San Diego to Ensenada, Callum posted about a stop in Rosarito eating tacos and enjoying the ocean view.
But this dream vacation took a sharp and lethal turn, a horrifying plot twist none could have anticipated. What started as an idyllic journey quickly spiraled into a dark tale of murder under the orders of one of the world's most notorious criminal organizations, the Sinaloa Cartel. However, the twist in our story today isn't the grim reality of the crimes themselves, which is unsettling on its own. What stands out even more is the stunning revelation from the Sinaloa Cartel itself.
Now, according to a new report, Mexican law enforcement did receive help to find the suspects from an unusual ally, the Sinaloa Cartel.
Yes, you heard that right. The cartel, known more for its unforgiving nature towards just about anyone who stands in its way, stepped into a very different role, claiming to have handed the alleged criminals over to the police. Remember how I mentioned that sometimes the line between good and evil can be quite blurry? Well, in an unprecedented move, the Sinaloa Cartel, a name that strikes fear across the globe, became an unlikely ally in solving the murders. But why would one of the most powerful drug syndicates help the authorities? According to them, it was all to avoid unwanted attention on their turf. The three surfers, blissfully unaware of the dangers below the surface of their surf paradise, found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. After their tragic disappearance near the cartel-controlled city of Ensenada, their bodies were tragically discovered at the bottom of a cliff, each with a bullet wound to the head, a brutal reminder of what can happen when you lock eyes with Mexico's narco thugs. And, in a statement that sounds like it's straight out of a crime thriller, a spokesperson for the cartel broke their silence. They were not merely observers, but active participants in cracking the case. They claimed they were low-level robbers acting alone, but we handed them over. It appears the cartel sought to clear their name, emphasizing that the chaos brought by the killings was bad for their business and image. The entire scenario raises a multitude of questions. Can criminals turn into crusaders for justice when it suits their needs? What does this mean for the families of Jack, Jake, and Callum, who had to fly to Mexico to identify their loved ones, now victims of a chilling crime? As we unpack this story, remember that this isn't just a tale of crime and investigation. It's a sobering reminder of the complicated tango between law and order, and the dancers can always switch sides whenever they please. So how did the cartel track down these criminals? What does this unusual gesture spell for the ongoing war against organized crime in Mexico? This video isn't just an exploration of a tragedy. It's a journey into the darkest corners of the criminal world, where fear and unpredictability in one of the most beautiful on earth run rampant. So let's start from the very beginning. The promising boys trip. As is the case with most abduction cases that we deal with here on this channel, this story started off innocently enough. Three best friends, Jake and Callum Robinson and Jack Carter Road, coming together from two corners of the globe, all set for an epic adventure on the spectacular but secluded beaches of Baja California. Jack was just months away from saying, "I do," eagerly looking forward to one of the biggest days of his life. But before settling down, he aimed to squeeze in a few more thrilling experiences. The vast, open ocean of Baja was the perfect destination too, with its legendary surf breaks and the promise of unforgettable memories. This was supposed to be a celebratory voyage, a reconvening of lifelong mates who shared a roaring passion for surfing, sunsets, and spontaneity. Their plan was pretty straightforward. They would chase the perfect wave, sleep under the stars, and live off the grid, away from the usual tourist spots. Jake and Callum, hailing from the spirited city of Perth, Australia, were no strangers to adventure. Jack, from the US, brought his own zest for life to the group. Together, they embarked on this journey with their eyes wide open to beauty and hearts full of dreams. Instagram and Facebook followers were treated to dynamic updates as the trio documented their exciting road trip along Baja's coastline.
During the trip from San Diego to Ensenada, Callum posted about a stop in Rosarito eating tacos and enjoying the ocean view.
From striking cliffs overlooking the Cerulean Sea to campfires on desolate stretches of sand, their social media feeds became a live broadcast of what seemed like an idyllic escape. With each post, they captivated friends and followers, sharing breathtaking views and candid snapshots of their journey. And, just to put things into perspective, for those of you who don't share the trio's passion for the sport, the beaches of Baja California are renowned not just for their untamed beauty, but also for their world-class waves, promising the perfect playground for just about any seasoned surfer. Needless to say, The excitement was palpable. Yet, as they moved farther from populated areas, embracing the isolation that came with hidden coves and secret surf spots, an underlying risk loomed. Unknown to them, the serene landscapes and rolling waves masked potential dangers. You see, Baja California also happens to be part of a cartel-controlled region that's buzzing with criminal activity.
The town has become a place where these two gangs clash.
Tonight, at least 10 people are dead, 9 others hurt after a shooting at a racing event in Baja.
As the days unfolded, their all-boys trip took on a rhythm of its own. Morning surfs, exploring local haunts, and evenings spent relishing the simple joys of a nomadic lifestyle. Yet, this dream trip was about to encounter realities far harsher than any ocean wave. You see, even in paradise, danger is always present, and our travelers would soon find this out the hard way. This brings us to the fateful day that changed everything. Become a tragedy.
They were in good spirits.
They say are pretty nice people. Absolutely. Very respectful.
Families and friends weren't too...
Family and friends say U.S. citizen Jack Carter Road and Australian natives and brothers Callum and Jake Robinson left San Diego last week on a surfing trip in Baja and never came back.
Saturday is the last time that his mother says that she heard from Callum and her other son, Jake. That's the same day the white Chevrolet Colorado truck they were traveling was seen at San Miguel Beach in Ensenada. On Wednesday, she posted a missing persons flyer to social media, pleading for help to find her sons and their friend Jack Carter wrote.
That being said, an alert went out, and the local authorities were notified. The search began immediately, with operations stretching on both land and digital domains. Families rallied on social media, spreading word of their disappearance and seeking any information that could lead to their whereabouts. The local communities near the last known locations of the trio organized search parties, combing through the possible paths they might have taken.
The community surf are pretty concerned, so bad. They're crying, they are stressful. Surfers, we see other surfers like our brothers.
But as one day turned into 3, then 5, the pit in everyone's stomach grew deeper. With each passing moment, the scenario of a simple misadventure seemed less plausible. The rugged, isolated terrains of Baja California, beautiful yet unforgiving, became the scene for desperate searches by both official rescue teams and droves of volunteers. Then, a full week after the eerie silence began, the search came to a tragic conclusion.
Breaking news, authorities in Mexico say 3 missing surfers, including an American, have been found dead.
It took 20 hours to pull the bodies from the well. You've seen the images here in a very isolated area south of Ensenada. It's about 110 miles from the border.
Authorities in Ensenada stumbled upon a harrowing scene in the rugged hillside area near the town. There, at the base of a deep well, lay the lifeless bodies of Jack, Jake, and Callum, each with a bullet wound to the head, marking a tragic and devastating finish to what had begun as a joyous exploration of the vast, wild beauty of Baja California. Also, there was this.
New images of a burned-out Chevrolet pickup truck that Mexican police say belonged to the missing surfers. How it got torched, though, is still a mystery this morning.
Clearly, something incredibly violent had taken place. The news shattered their community across continents, from the sunny coasts of Australia to the lively cities of the US. The lives of 3 free-spirited young men, aged just between 30 and 33, had been brutally snuffed way before their time. And, as the fresh details of their untimely demise were starting to come to light, authorities scrambled to piece together the events leading up to the tragedy. Meanwhile, the world that had followed their expedition, now gripped by shock and sorrow, awaited answers. How had a trip filled with such hope and excitement descended into despair and death in the mere blink of an eye? Who was the dangerous figure that these men encountered?
Drugs are prevalent in this area. Cartels are prevalent in this area. In terms of the safety for tourists, because a lot of people, the argument seems to be Baja California is incredibly dangerous.
Well, the story is just about to get even more mind-boggling, because the Sinaloa Cartel just stepped in, and they have some interesting things to say about all of this. In an unexpected twist that could rival any crime thriller, the notorious Sinaloa Cartel, a name synonymous with some of the most feared and widespread criminal activities across the globe, stepped into the spotlight. Only this time, they're up to their usual business. They're here to deliver some shocking revelations. In a stark departure from their reputation, the Sinaloa Cartel issued a statement that can even be interpreted as a form of cooperation. They're now claiming that they had delivered the alleged murderers of Jack, Jake, and Callum directly into the hands of law enforcement.
They say they charge suspect Jesus Heraldo, also known as El Kikas, with the crime of forced disappearance.
This revelation came as a shock to everyone from the local authorities to the global community following the case. The Sinaloa Cartel, often operating from the shadows and with little regard for doing the right thing, was now positioning itself as a facilitator of justice. And, to make matters even more shocking, the cartel had gone out of their way to locate and capture the people responsible, according to their spokesperson. Not only that, but, apparently, they were driven by a desire to distance themselves from the violent incident that had claimed the lives of the 3 tourists. Who would have known that the Sinaloa Cartel is capable of being just as pragmatic as it is brutal? We all know what the Sinaloa Cartel is mostly known for. So why did they feel like being tied back to this particular incident would be detrimental to their organization? Well, it seems like the brutal slaying of these international citizens had brought unwanted attention to their operations in the region, an area they controlled but wished to keep out of international headlines for such heinous acts. By handing over the accused to the police, the cartel aimed to lay to rest any suspicions about their involvement and, even more importantly, perhaps, demonstrate a controlled command over their own territory. So, what did the cartel have to say about the people responsible for the crime? They were low-level robbers acting alone, but we handed them over, one of the sicarios said. According to him, this was nothing more than a carjacking that went terribly wrong. But wait, doesn't this statement also imply that the cartel was either monitoring the men responsible or had means of clamping down on criminal activities under their domain? Yes, it certainly seems that way. So, after hearing of the extensive efforts that were being made to capture these offenders, the cartel decided to conduct their own search and then inform the authorities about where they could find them. This act of apparent vigilante justice was purportedly done to ensure that the cartel was seen not as part of the problem, but as part of the solution. The more you know. And obviously, this bizarre twist raised numerous eyebrows and questions. Could a cartel, known for its ruthless conduct, suddenly turn guardian? Was this an attempt to manipulate the narrative and curry favor with local law enforcement, or a genuine move to deflect any damage to their public image? Needless to say, everyone speculated on the motivations behind the cartel's actions. After all, there were many possibilities, from a strategic move to improve public perception, to internal politics, aiming for stability and damage control. Meanwhile, the families of the victims and the general public grappled with the confusing notion that the same type of organization, often villainized in the press and blamed for much of the region's violence, might have played a key role in solving these tragic murders. And, as the investigation continued, the capacity of the justice system to independently verify the cartel's claims and ensure a transparent legal process came under intense scrutiny. What had initially seemed like a straightforward case of violent crime was now turning into a complex narrative involving layers of power, influence, and unexpected acts of intervention that promised to keep just about anyone on edge. In the never-ending saga of the trio's disappearance and subsequent tragic fate, a case that had turned from unpredictable to even more unpredictable, the law enforcement agency's diligent efforts began to paint a clearer picture of what exactly happened. The arrests of 2 men and a woman marked a major breakthrough in the investigation. What's more, each of the suspects was facing some pretty damning evidence, all of which pointed to a robbery gone wrong, instead of the cold-blooded crime that most people were expecting. And the most crucial bit of evidence? Callum's phone was found in the possession of the woman who had just been arrested. This piece of evidence not only strengthened the case, but also showcased the quick and efficient cross-referencing work by the police, who were under immense pressure to solve the case amid an international outcry and a surprising intervention by the Sinaloa Cartel. Not only that, but as investigators dug deeper, even more chilling details began to surface. Among the arrested, one man by the name of Jesus Gerardo had reportedly made a disturbing admission to his girlfriend right after the crime.
Prosecutors revealed in that courtroom that his girlfriend has turned on him. Now, we're paraphrasing here. I believe we have a graphic to show you, but she has told prosecutors that he came home and said to her, essentially, that I screwed up 3 gringos. She's responded, "What do you mean by that?" And he has said, "I killed them." She's then gone on to tell prosecutors that he showed her car that had new tires on it.
The evidence was certainly starting to stack up by this point. Surveillance footage, cell phone tracking, and forensics tied the suspects to the crime scene. Testimonies from witnesses who last saw the trio and various digital footprints formed a timeline that implicated the suspects in the heartless act. The police meticulously pieced together the motives and opportunities, painting a narrative of a carjacking gone fatally wrong.
The theory behind all this, and according to the Attorney General, they were there camping. These guys show up in another truck and apparently approach the surfers, and they either want the vehicle or the tires.
Think about it. There are places in this world where a tire is worth more than a human life. And the fact that the Sinaloa Cartel came forward and claimed that they had handed over the criminals to avoid unwanted attention only made matters even more complicated. This unusual claim by the cartel was met with skepticism and wariness by some officials and the public, raising questions about the influence and power the cartel wielded in both criminal and lawful interventions. This obviously prompted a deeper examination of the relationships between criminals, local populations, and the ever-present reach of the cartels. But more on that later. In all of this mess, one thing was clear. Ever since the cartel got involved, a new layer of both moral as well as legal ambiguity was now added to the case. There are enough twists and turns in this entire ordeal to make your head spin, and we'll get into those in a minute. But let's first take a look at what we know for sure. The fatal carjacking. The authorities spent a great deal of time piecing together the events that led up to Jack, Jake, and Callum's demise. Here's how they say it happened. So, picture this. The guys are cruising in their truck, having a blast, when they run into some sketchy characters. These guys weren't after wallets or phones. They had their sights set on something else. The tires of the boys' truck. The investigators later learned that the attackers, driven by profit in a region where even basic items like car parts are in high demand, saw an opportunity in the surfer's well-equipped foreign model truck. Now, instead of handing over the keys and calling it a day, our trio decides to stand their ground. Maybe they thought they could talk their way out of it. We'll never know for sure. This act of defiance, while brave, tragically set off a violent reaction from the carjackers. So, before they know it, things go from bad to worse. Shouts ring out, fists fly, and shots are fired. There's chaos. When the dust settles, Jack, Jake, and Callum are gone, shot at close range, victims of a botched carjacking that turned dark. All that's left is a horrifying crime scene.
Late in the afternoon, she issued a news release saying that the families had identified the bodies and there would be no need for DNA or for any further testing, genetic testing of any sort. So we know now for a fact, definitely, that the missing surfers are the people found in that well.
As investigators dug deeper, the shockwaves rippled far and wide. The local community is rattled, the families are shattered, and people everywhere are reminded of life's fragility. A definite reminder that danger can always hide behind any corner. So, now that these petty thieves turned into full-blown murderers, there was only one thing left for them to do. They needed to destroy the evidence and make a clean escape. But how? Well, what they did next only goes to show how truly heartless these guys really are. Once the fatal shots had been fired, these guys were quick to do some damage control. They obviously understood the gravity of their actions, or at the very least, the potential consequences if caught. They set about destroying the crime scene. In a chilling display of cold calculation, they turned their attention to the surfers' belongings. The first target was the surfers' tents. These weren't just shelters, but temporary homes filled with personal effects, evidence of the lives that buzzed with excitement and adventure moments before tragedy struck. The attackers, driven by a ruthless intent to remove any signs of their involvement, doused the tents with a flammable liquid before setting them on fire. As the flames consumed their belongings, a horrendous symbol of the surfers' adventurous spirits was reduced to ashes. Not stopping there, the criminals knew that the pickup truck, the original target of their robbery, could serve as a crucial piece of evidence against them. It held not only fingerprints, but possibly GPS data and other traces that could directly tie them to the crime. They didn't want to leave anything to chance, so they drove the vehicle to a secluded area north of Ensenada, far from the initial site of the confrontation. Once there, in a similarly cold-blooded manner, they set the truck on fire, ensuring that it burned thoroughly, hoping the flames would consume both the vehicle and any forensic evidence it contained. And this act of arson was not only methodical and horrific, but it also went on to prove the perpetrator's awareness of forensic science and criminal investigations. See, they knew that even the smallest oversight could lead them to arrest and prosecution. So, by burning the vehicle, they aimed not only to destroy physical evidence, but also to create a tough barrier to break between them and the investigation trail. Then, once investigators arrived at the scene later on, the charred remains of the tents and the skeletal frame of the burned-out truck painted a sobering picture of the lengths to which the attackers had gone. Each piece of burned material, each ash, told a silent story of panic and desperation, of a crime intended to be hidden forever. The forensic team worked meticulously, collecting whatever residues and materials were left that could withstand the high temperatures of the fires. Remarkably, even amidst such devastation, modern forensic techniques and investigative determinations often yield clues that fire cannot entirely erase. This ruthless attempt at literally burning down all of the evidence was a dead giveaway of the nature of the crime. Not a spontaneous act of violence, but a premeditated orchestration aimed at theft, murder, and escape without consequence. It highlighted not only the brutality of the crime itself, but also the chilling foresight and preparedness of the perpetrators to go to any length to avoid accountability for their actions.
Wearing an orange jumpsuit with cuffs on his ankles that were chained to the floor, suspected ringleader El Queques was silent through most of the hearing, speaking only to ask his lawyers a few questions at the very end. Tonight, he remains behind bars, where he'll stay until his next hearing in November.
And it's not all smooth sailing from here on either. Yes, the perpetrators have been captured, and yes, there is some pretty compelling evidence pointing right back at them. They're definitely not getting away with it. But the thing is, whenever such a crime occurs, a ton of legal and even diplomatic issues play out. Here's the deal. This isn't just a local issue. The minute that 3 citizens from 2 different corners of the world got slayed, that's when the problem blew up to international proportions. You see, now law enforcement from both the US and Australia are getting involved. Why? There are lots of unanswered questions regarding this case. Everything from ensuring touristic safety to solving the dilemma of cartel involvement. And since the case is pretty much headlining every major news outlet throughout the world, they can't just let things slide, and neither should they. The fact that this entire ordeal happened in a place that's otherwise famous for its touristic lore is enough to make your skin crawl. And even if it weren't a popular tourist destination, should these things even carry on happening in this day and age? But let's take a step back for a minute and think of Jake, Jack, and Callum. 3 young men united by a shared passion for surfing, who went out looking for the best wave, only to have their lives cut short in such a shockingly brutal way. There's nothing we can do to bring them back into their loved ones' arms, and nothing will ever erase the pain that their families must be feeling right now. And as if the whole situation wasn't heartbreaking enough, here's a glimpse into Callum Robinson's soul, right from a voicemail he sent his girlfriend mere days before the senseless attack.
Happy Tuesday. Good morning. It's 11:11, and I'm just thinking about you. I'm sensing a big grin on your face for some reason today. I hope you're full of positivity and smiles. Cheers, baby. Miss ya. Just wanted to drop you a quick message and say hello, baby.
Callum Robinson's girlfriend reveals the sweet voice message he sent her before he was murdered in Mexico.
Unfortunately, we can't bring Callum back to his girlfriend's arms. But you know what we can do? We can open up a broader conversation about international travel safety and make sure we educate ourselves on how to steer clear of any potential trouble when traveling, especially when going into places where cartels still reign supreme. That way, we can prove that Jake, Jack, and Callum's fate was not in vain after all. Do you think this tragic case will bring about some much-needed change? We'd love to hear your opinions on this. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, if you've enjoyed our video, then please give it a thumbs up and make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can always keep updated on all things cartel. Until next time, stay safe.